Hey, and welcome, Gurus, to the section conclusion of the Traffic Manager section of this course. I'm Chase, your Azure Training Architect here at A Cloud Guru, Pluralsight company. And in this section conclusion, we're going to wrap up all the things we covered in this section, and we're going to do so by covering a case study scenario. And we're going to use this case study scenario to review our Traffic Manager concepts that we covered in this section and review the configuring of Traffic Manager routing and those routing methods. So without further ado, let's take a look at that case study scenario for our Control-Alt-Suites organization. For this organization, we're going to review the Traffic Manager concepts of the front end, the back end endpoints, and leveraging that Layer 7 DNS-based load balancer that Traffic Manager is, and also those HTTP settings to provide us that endpoint monitoring or a health probe, if that helps you remember it better. And then we're going to review configuring Traffic Manager routing using those routing methods provided to us: priority, weighted, performance, geographic, multi-value, and subnet. So for our case study scenario here, we have two different regions, both with application gateways. We have a Traffic Manager profile, and these are endpoints of our Traffic Manager profile. We have our client here, and our client makes a request to Traffic Manager, and they're able to get the endpoint where they are going to be able to access the Region 2 application gateway, which they're closest to. So it's going to provide them the lowest latency. And then the other client does the same thing. It asks Traffic Manager for an endpoint, and Traffic Manager decides that the Region 1 is going to provide the lowest latency here. And this is how Traffic Manager works for our case study scenario. Now, as you might have guessed, this is a lot like what we did in the demo. Here we're using performance-based routing method. So now let's take a look at the Traffic Manager concepts. The main purpose of Traffic Manager here is to leverage DNS-based load balancing at global scale across multiple endpoints, which provides us that high availability across regions. So we have regional resiliency. If one service goes down in one region, well, we have other services, presumably in other regions, that it will fail over to. As we saw with those HTTP monitoring settings, we can configure that failover. And all of these resources behind our Traffic Manager don't necessarily have to be in Azure. Of course, they could be Azure endpoints, but they can also be external endpoints and nested Traffic Manager profiles under a Traffic Manager profile so that we can stack those routing methods. Now, with Azure Traffic Manager, the main thing here is we make a request to our local DNS servers for some traffic, and it gets routed to Traffic Manager. Traffic Manager performs the DNS lookup and provides the IP address back to the client. The client then is routed to that endpoint that it is configured with our Traffic Manager. So that pretty much sums up the Traffic Manager concepts that we covered in this section. Now let's talk about those Traffic Manager routing methods we talked about in this section. We had priority, where we can prioritize a primary and a backup endpoint. We have the weighted, where we can distribute traffic according to the weight value that we set. We have performance, which we use in our demonstration to send traffic to the closest endpoint that provided the lowest latency. Then we have geographic, where we can route traffic based on the geographic location of the client. And this is, again, using that local DNS server for that client. Then we have multi-value, where we can return multiple endpoints to a request. And then the subnet, where we can route that traffic based on the requester's IP address. All right, Gurus, that sums up everything that we covered in this section. Thanks so much for joining me in this section, and I look forward to seeing you in the next sections.